Every day, each of us carries invisible chains. They are not made of metal, but of repetition. Actions we do again and again, sometimes without even noticing, until they define who we are. These chains are what we call habits. Some of them nourish us, others quietly destroy us. The question is not whether you have habits. The question is, are you the master of them or their prisoner? Today, I invite you to look at yourself with honesty, with clarity, and with courage. Because the moment you decide to break free from bad habits is the moment you take back your power and step into the person you were always meant to become every day. Human beings are guided by patterns of behavior, patterns that most of the time happen beneath the level of awareness. These patterns become automatic actions, and we call them habits. When a person wakes up, the hand might reach for the phone without thinking. When stress appears, the body might move toward food, toward distraction, toward something that promises relief. None of this requires conscious decision-making because habits are deeply embedded in the structure of the mind. The repetition of small actions creates grooves in the brain, and just like water flowing through channels in the earth, energy continues to flow where it has been allowed many times before. The challenge begins when those grooves are not serving health, not serving clarity, not serving the life you truly want to live. A habit in itself is neutral. It is only when the direction of the habit leads to stagnation, weakness, or even destruction that it becomes a burden. For example, reaching for a cigarette may feel like comfort, but over time it weakens the body. Spending hours scrolling endlessly through a device may feel like relaxation, but it steals attention and energy. These habits are not merely actions. They are chains that bind a person, pulling them away from freedom. The first step in breaking free is awareness. Many people believe they are conscious of their habits, but in reality, they are only aware of the surface. To see clearly, you must observe yourself as if you are looking at another person. Watch your reactions when you wake up, when you face stress, when you are bored, when you feel lonely. Ask yourself in these moments, what do I do without thinking? It is in these unnoticed spaces that habits live and grow strongest. Once awareness is present, the next step is honesty. A person can only transform what they are willing to face. To admit that a habit is harmful can be uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront the truth that you have allowed yourself to be guided by something that is weakening your potential. Yet, honesty is the doorway. Without stepping through it, there can be no transformation. Many people avoid this moment of truth, convincing themselves that the habit is small, not important, or that change is impossible. But in reality, the smallest repeated actions carry the weight of an entire life. When honesty is embraced, responsibility follows. Responsibility means recognizing that no one else can remove the chain for you. Others may guide, support, or inspire, but the work must be done by your own mind, your own discipline. This is not a punishment, but a gift, because it means the power lies within you. If you created the habit through repetition, you can also dissolve it through conscious repetition of new actions. The same force that once built the chain can now be used to break it. It is important to understand the nature of the mind. The mind does not enjoy emptiness. If you attempt to remove a habit and leave nothing in its place, the mind will reach back for what is familiar. This is why substitution is powerful. Instead of feeding the same groove, you guide the energy into a new path. For example, when the urge arises to smoke, instead of lighting a cigarette, take a few conscious breaths. When the hand reaches for the phone out of boredom, direct it toward a book, a journal, or a practice that strengthens focus. By redirecting rather than suppressing, you allow new grooves to form. Discipline, at its core, is not about force. It is about consistency. A small change practiced daily is more powerful than a great effort made only once. The martial monks understood this truth. Repetition shapes reality. Every strike, every stance, Every breath practiced with awareness builds not only skill but also character. In the same way, every small decision you make in favor of freedom over habit strengthens your ability to live consciously. What begins as a single choice becomes easier the next time, and even easier after that. Slowly, the weight of the chain grows lighter. What once seemed impossible becomes natural. The mind, which was once the prisoner of repetition, becomes the master of it. And with each step, you realize that habits are not destiny. They are only the reflection of what you choose to repeat. The second essential point to understand when it comes to breaking bad habits is the power of triggers. Habits do not arise in isolation. They are connected to specific moments, emotions, or environments that act as a signal for the behavior to begin. These triggers can be external, like walking into the kitchen and seeing a jar of cookies, or internal, like the sudden rush of stress that compels someone to bite their nails. The habit is not simply the action itself, it is the automatic reaction to the trigger. If you want to transform a habit, you must first learn to recognize and manage the triggers that set it in motion. Most people move through their days reacting unconsciously to triggers. They feel restless and reach for their phones. They feel anxious and grab a drink. They feel lonely and overeat. The habit becomes so closely linked to the trigger that the two appear inseparable. But this is an illusion. The trigger and the reaction are not the same. There is a space between them, and within that space lies the possibility of choice. This space is often invisible because it has been covered over by years of automatic behavior. To break a bad habit, the work is to slow down enough to notice that space again. Imagine a person who always snacks late at night. The trigger may not be hunger. It may be boredom, or it may be the simple sight of the television. Each time the television is turned on, the brain has learned to expect food. The body begins to crave, not because it needs energy, but because the trigger has been linked to the action. When the person realizes this connection, they have already begun the process of breaking the chain. Awareness of the trigger opens the door to change. One of the most effective strategies is to alter the environment. If certain spaces or objects trigger a habit, removing or rearranging them changes the pattern. For example, if a person is trying to stop smoking, throwing away ashtrays, cleaning the smell of smoke from clothing, and avoiding areas where smoking is common reduces the power of the trigger. Similarly, if a person is trying to cut down on mindless phone use, placing the phone in another room while working creates physical distance that makes the trigger less immediate. By shaping the environment, you reduce the automatic response. But not all triggers can be removed. Stress, fatigue, sadness, these are part of human life. You cannot eliminate them, but you can learn to respond differently. This is where mindfulness becomes essential. Mindfulness means observing the trigger without rushing to react. When stress arises, instead of reaching immediately for the habitual escape, you take a breath, you acknowledge the sensation in the body, and you create a pause. In that pause, you remind yourself, I do not need to follow the old path. I can choose differently. Training the mind to recognize this pause is like training a muscle. At first, it feels weak. You may notice the trigger only after you have already given into the habit. But even this is progress, because noticing afterward is better than not noticing at all. Over time, the awareness moves closer to the moment. You begin to catch the trigger as it arises, and eventually you can see it before the reaction happens. At that point, you are no longer controlled by the trigger. You are in control of how you respond. Another powerful method is to replace the automatic reaction with a deliberate ritual. Rituals are conscious actions that serve a higher purpose. For example, if stress is the trigger, instead of reaching for alcohol, one could take a walk, practice breathing, or write down thoughts in a journal. The trigger remains, but the response is transformed. Over time, the new ritual becomes linked with the trigger, and the old habit loses its hold. It is also important to reflect on the deeper meaning behind triggers. Often, a bad habit is a response to an unaddressed need. Overeating may be connected to a need for comfort. Excessive scrolling may be linked to a need for connection. Smoking may be tied to a need for calm. If you address only the surface habit but ignore the deeper need, the mind will continue searching for an outlet. By asking yourself, what am I truly seeking when this urge appears? You move closer to the root of the habit. When the real need is acknowledged and met in a healthier way, the habit loses its foundation. Breaking bad habits, therefore, is not about fighting against yourself. It is about understanding the relationship between triggers and reactions. The more you study this relationship, the clearer it becomes that you are not powerless. You are simply conditioned, and conditioning can be rewritten. The trigger will come, but the response is yours to choose. The third essential point is discipline, and discipline is often misunderstood. Many people imagine discipline as something harsh, something restrictive, something that takes away freedom. But in truth, discipline is the very force that creates freedom. Without discipline, the mind is scattered, the body follows impulses, and life becomes a series of reactions to desires and distractions. With discipline, you regain control over your own direction, and instead of being pushed around by old habits, you begin to shape new ones with clarity and intention. When trying to break a bad habit, most people rely on bursts of motivation. They feel inspired for a short time, they declare a strong intention, and perhaps for a few days or a few weeks they succeed. But motivation is like the weather. It changes, it comes and goes, and it cannot be relied upon as a stable force. Discipline is different. Discipline is the structure you build that carries you forward, even when motivation disappears. It is the agreement you make with yourself that no matter how you feel, you will act in alignment with the person you want to become. The essence of discipline lies in consistency. A small action, repeated every day, has far greater power than a huge effort made once in a while. Imagine water dripping onto a stone. One drop alone does nothing, but over time, drop after drop, the stone is shaped. Habits are like that stone, and discipline is the constant flow of drops that carve a new form. If you wish to break a bad habit, you cannot rely on one great effort. You must rely on steady, daily practice. Even when it feels insignificant, the consistency accumulates and transforms. Discipline also means designing routines that make it easier to stay on the right path. Instead of expecting willpower to fight every temptation, discipline arranges life so that fewer battles are necessary. For example, if you are trying to stop eating unhealthy snacks, discipline is not just resisting when the craving appears. It is also making sure those snacks are not kept in your home. If you want to limit screen time, discipline is setting fixed hours when the phone is put away and following that rule every day. These routines act as a container, and within that container, your energy can flow without being wasted on constant struggle. The body can be a great teacher of discipline. In martial arts training, a single movement is practiced thousands of times. The purpose is not only to perfect the technique, but also to train the mind to accept repetition without boredom. Each repetition is an opportunity to practice focus, patience, and control. Breaking a bad habit works in the same way. Each time you choose not to give in, each time you redirect your action, you are practicing discipline. At first, it feels unnatural. The old habit calls loudly, and the new path feels weak. But with each repetition, the new path strengthens, and eventually it becomes natural. An important aspect of discipline is self-respect. Many people fail to maintain discipline because they treat promises to themselves as less important than promises to others. They cancel their own commitments easily, while keeping the commitments they make to friends or colleagues. But discipline begins when you recognize that the promises you make to yourself are sacred. If you say you will avoid a certain habit today, honor that as if it were a contract. Each time you keep that promise, you build trust in yourself. Each time you break it, you weaken that trust. True discipline is not about controlling others or proving something to the world. It is about proving to yourself that you can rely on your own word. Another misunderstanding is that discipline requires perfection. In reality, discipline accepts that mistakes will happen, but it does not allow mistakes to become excuses. If you give in to a bad habit once, discipline means returning immediately to the path, not waiting until the next week, the next month, or the next year. Just as a person who stumbles while walking does not remain on the ground, but gets up and continues, discipline is the act of returning without hesitation. The slip does not erase the progress. What matters is the continuation. Discipline also requires patience. Habits built over years cannot be erased overnight. The mind resists change, and the body craves what is familiar. Discipline is the strength to endure this discomfort without surrendering. It is the understanding that transformation takes time, and the willingness to keep walking even when the results are not yet visible. This patience is itself a form of freedom, because it frees you from the constant demand for instant results. In the end, discipline is not a punishment and not a prison. It is the daily practice of aligning your actions with your deeper values. It is the path that allows you to replace reaction with intention, weakness with strength, and chains with freedom. Through discipline, the scattered energy of the mind is gathered, and the person who once felt powerless in the face of bad habits discovers the ability to shape a new reality. The fourth essential point in breaking bad habits is persistence. Persistence is the quality that keeps you moving forward. Even when the process becomes difficult, even when progress feels slow, even when obstacles appear again and again. Many people start strong with enthusiasm and energy, but when they encounter setbacks, they stop. They convince themselves that failure means they are not capable, that the habit is too powerful, or that change is not possible. But the truth is that failure is not the end of the path. Failure is part of the path, and persistence is the ability to keep walking despite it. When you attempt to break a habit, you are working against years of conditioning. The brain has built strong connections that favor the old behavior. To dissolve those connections and replace them with new ones requires time, and during this time the old habit will try to return. It may whisper that one more time will not hurt. It may disguise itself as comfort, as reward, as relief. If you expect the journey to be smooth, you will be disappointed. But if you expect struggle and commit to persistence, then you will not be surprised when the challenge appears. You will meet it with strength, and you will continue. Persistence is not about never falling. It is about never staying down. Each time you slip, each time you return to the old habit, persistence means you rise again. You begin again and again, as many times as needed. The danger is not in failing once. The danger is in deciding that one failure means total defeat. Persistence understands that progress is measured not by perfection, but by the number of times you return to the path after leaving it. The mind often seeks quick results. People want to see immediate changes. When those changes do not appear, discouragement sets in. But habits are not built in a single day, and they are not broken in a single day either. Persistence requires patience, the patience to keep practicing even when visible results are absent. Think of a seed placed in the ground. For weeks, nothing appears above the surface, but beneath the soil, roots are forming. The same is true of breaking habits. For a while, it may seem as though nothing has changed. But inside, the new connections are taking shape, and persistence is what allows them to grow strong enough to finally show themselves. Another aspect of persistence is resilience against self-criticism. Many people speak to themselves in harsh, punishing tones when they make mistakes. This self-attack weakens the will, and instead of rising stronger, they feel hopeless and surrender. Persistence requires a different approach. Instead of judgment, you respond to failure with learning. You ask yourself, why did I slip this time? What trigger caught me unaware? What strategy can I use next time? In this way, every failure becomes training, every setback becomes a teacher, and persistence transforms even mistakes into progress. Support can also strengthen persistence. When a journey is long, walking it alone can feel heavy. Sharing your intention with someone you trust, or surrounding yourself with people who encourage growth, provides energy in the moments when your own is low. The presence of accountability makes it harder to abandon the path. And the encouragement of others reminds you of your strength. Persistence grows not only from personal effort, but also from connection with those who support your transformation. To persist also means to keep your vision alive. If the only thing you focus on is what you are losing, persistence will fade. But if you continually remind yourself of what you are gaining, greater health, greater freedom, greater strength, then the vision becomes a source of fuel. Each time the old habit calls, you return to the vision of who you want to become. That vision shines like a light in the distance, and persistence is the step after step that moves you closer to it. Persistence also involves flexibility. Some people think persistence means doing the same thing in the same way over and over. But true persistence allows for adjustment. If one strategy does not work, you try another. If one routine is too difficult to maintain, you design a new one that is realistic. If one trigger keeps defeating you, you find a new method to handle it. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is the willingness to continue the journey while adapting to what you learn along the way. Every great transformation in life has required persistence. Skills are built through it, strength is forged through it, and freedom from destructive patterns is achieved through it. The habit that feels impossible to break today becomes weaker tomorrow and weaker the day after if you persist. The mind that feels trapped learns to see its own power if you persist. The body that feels enslaved by repetition learns discipline and balance if you persist. Step by step, attempt by attempt, you create the momentum that eventually carries you beyond the grip of the old pattern. In the end, life is nothing more than the sum of repeated actions. Every habit you keep is a vote for the person you are becoming. To break free from bad habits is not simply about stopping something negative. It is about reclaiming your strength, your focus, your freedom. Awareness shows you the chains. Understanding triggers reveals where they begin. Discipline gives you the power to choose differently, and persistence ensures you continue until the new path is strong. No one else can walk this journey for you. The decision is yours, the effort is yours, and so too will be the reward. When you break bad habits, you are not only changing what you do, you are transforming who you are. And that transformation begins not tomorrow, not someday, but now.